Ladies and gentlemen, welcome everyone. Today we have a new amazing episode of the In Production podcast, and our guest is making it amazing. Dev, nice to meet you. Please tell people more about yourself and why should people listen.
Yeah. Thanks. Nice to meet you too. So great to be here. My name is Debasish Bhattacharjee. People call me Deb. I have been spending last 22 years building and scaling software platforms and AI system across Fortune 500 organizations like Oracle, IBM, Broadcom, and SAP recently. Over past few years, I have shipped 7 production AI systems that collectively drive over 65 million in annual savings that were not a lab experiment. They were a real deployment across expense management, procurement, human resource, and customer support. But with a small team of 12 to 15 engineers, shipping an MVP is under a quarter. Today, I run Autom EXCC, which is where I advise enterprise clients and AI startups on the stuff that actually matters. So AI governance, secure LLM deployments in a required environment like HIPAA, GDPR, FedRAMP, and the hard part that nobody talks about is getting AI from a sandbox to a production. So I'm still very much hands-on in the code. I built agentic AI automation tools and work through, expert networks about every roughly 15 advisory engagements in a year. What I have learned in this, the demo is easy. Production is a job. And there is a massive gap between what people say work in AI and what actually survive contacts with the real data, real compliance requirements, and the real people. That's where I would like to talk about today.
For sure. This is amazing. We will find a lot of golden nuggets in this conversation. My first question is going to be a question around your deployments. You mentioned that you did 7 AI deployments in SAP alone. For the listeners and the viewers, let's say they're facing their first AI deployment. Can you talk more about your experience? What were your expectations when you were doing the first AI deployment? What were you expecting? What did go right? What did go wrong? Kind of like as a general wisdom, what should people prepare for, what they should expect so they can learn on your mistakes?
Yeah, thanks for jumping this. Yeah, it's so to clarify, the 7 systems we shipped across my time is in Fortune 500 company.
I see. Okay.
Not just in one company, but the pattern was consistent across all the teams. What made them work is a small focused team, like 12 to 25 engineers per project, not sprawling committees. We would ship at MVP under a quarter, then iterate based on the real production feedbacks and a clear ROI framing from day one. So I learned the early CFOs don't care about model architecture. They don't care what does this cost today? What does this save? What's the risk if it is break? Once I started pitching in that language, approval rates went from 40% to almost 100%. So the gap nobody talks about is the demo. Demos works well, great. But the production, that's where you hit data quality issues, compliance frictions, and the fact that 95% of accurate models still fail on 5% of the real transactions. So you need human escalation paths, staged rollout, like shadow canary to production all the way up to, and governance that actually fits the business. So the biggest lesson is the AI doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to know when it's not perfect, and it needs to tell someone. That's the difference between a pilot that took impressive and the system that business actually trust. So first AI deployment, the expectation and versus a reality. What I would suggest or honest answer is I was off by about 400%. And the gap had nothing to do with the model. It had everything to do with the data and the people. What I expected is, you can think about it like I thought the hard part was the AI, getting the model into the work, turning it and shipping it. That's a classic engineering thinking. So what actually happened is the data was a monster. We inherited messy, undocumented expense data spanning 30 plus countries, multiple legacy systems, inconsistent categorization. The model was ready in 6 weeks. Data cleanup took almost like 4 months. We discovered like a shadow process, like things people actually did that nobody had documented. So that system had to handle those and it failed in the production. People were not ready. We shipped to the power user first. They didn't trust the model. confidence came only after 3 weeks of human review or every, single output, not because it was a requirement, because that's what it took psychologically. That feedback loop also gave us the calibration data to set threshold correctly. So governance was not the afterthought, it was the blocker. So compliance, audit trail, who is accountable when it fails? We built that in a week 2, not week 12. So what I would tell you to know is start with a failure scenario, not the success scenario. Before you pick a model, sit down with the people accountable for the output and ask, what happens when this goes wrong? Start with a scenario. If they cannot answer clearly, you are not ready, no matter
Interesting.
how good your model is at. So capability, I call it like a capability without readiness is a liability.
Okay. This makes sense and it's a very good insight. And I would love to continue this topic, but through the lens of you having kind of like triple experience, because like right now you're advising different companies in terms of AI implementation. At the same time, you're building AI products for other enterprises. And at the same time, you're also running enterprise operations and running AI in your own day-to-day at your work. So you have like 3 kind of lenses. What do you learn in each position? Because this is the triple position. When you're advising, you're kind of like doing this for external organizations and you're doing AI for yourself. What is the main difference? Which is the hardest one? Which is the most fun one? What is your learning doing all 3 simultaneously?
Very interesting question. So I will answer it in a different way. So it's a triple lens, like advisor, builder, and operator. So the hardest one is the advisor role. You're sitting in a room with a CTO who genuinely trying to figure out if they should build or buy. And you have to resist the urge to simplify. You see the pattern, a data mesh complexity, vendor lock-in creeping in, but you can't just hand them a playbook. You have to ask the right questions so they own the answer. So the most fun is the builder side. I am hands-on with the cloud code and agentic system right now, compressing multi-hour research workflow into minutes. That's where you get the immediate feedback loop. Does it work or not? What the operator role teaches you that the other 2 cannot. It's number 1, accountability at scale. And number 2 is when you are running AI in your own infrastructure. You can't blame the vendor or hide behind that's someone else's problem. You feel the pain of the drift that nobody caught or a compliance audit trail that is totally incomplete. So the real learning is they are not. Advisors see pattern from 15 companies. The builder tests those patterns on a real data and the operator catches edge cases that advisor miss and the builder's demo glosses over. So that is the calibration. So that calibration, seeing the gap between what vendors promise, what companies hope for, and what actually survives, contact with the real data. That's what make this triple position valuable.
It's very cool. And especially right now when the market is moving so fast and like it changes that news from a few months ago, they seem like they have been ages ago. Whenever you're in a leadership position and you are deciding on how organization gonna work for the next couple of years, with this pace of changes, sometimes like let's say you make a good decision that was good in September, but right now in April, it doesn't seem like it was a good decision because there's been so many technology advancements, the competition came out, and you understand that the model, which was very good in September, now is can be improved. So how do you navigate those kind of conversations where, what would you recommend to people that have made a decision that they have, let's say they have locked themselves in with a certain vendor, and now they understand that they need to go and they need to pivot, make a pivot and change the decision. What would you recommend to leaders like that? How to start those conversations? How to end those conversations, what to say. Because at the same time, you made a mistake, but you didn't make a mistake. You made the best reasonable choice, but now you need to go and change something.
Yeah, that's right. So the honest answer, own it early. Frame it as, as a market validation and show the exit plan. So I actually lived with this, committed a closed model provider when it made sense, the cost projection, under stability, all solid. 6 months later, open source improved faster than we predicted. Prices dropped and our original justification didn't hold. So here is what I did: is don't sugarcoat it.
Mm-hmm.
I walked into a CTO's office and said we made the right call with the information we had. So the market moved faster than our assumption. Here is a plan to fix it. The CTO respected the direction way more than spin. So the second one is lead with a financial impact, not regret. Frame it as, staying logged in cost for X dollar annually, migrating cost Y and takes Z weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Net benefit is clear. Number diffuses the blame over conversation fast.
Mm-hmm.
And number three is show you have built for your flexibility. This is why I mandate abstraction layer. So model agnostic interfaces everywhere. If you can't
Mm-hmm.
swap the model behind the interface under a 1 week, your architecture is totally wrong. That makes switching a technical problem, not an organizational crisis. And the number fourth, which is also, I would think it's a very important, is a quarterly benchmarking, not 5 years bet.
Okay.
Foundation models are not an ERP decisions anymore. They are
100%.
12 to 18 months tactical choice that need, revisiting, set the expectation upfront. So late bad news is always worse than, early bad news. So move fast.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the main part is open it early and own it clearly. That's the whole part. The hardest part is not the technical pivot. It's the psychological one. Your team needs to know changing courses is not a failure. It's a learning at a speed.
Okay. It's I haven't even thought about that because I'm not technical myself, and I haven't even thought that you also need to talk to the engineering team to say, "Hey guys, it's not, we didn't do a bad job. Everybody performed well, but now we're changing this because you mentioned governance earlier in the conversation, and you also mentioned that often governance is a blocker. Like it's not a protective environment that helps everybody stay on the same goal but be innovative at the same time. Often it shuts down innovation. In your experience in consulting, from everything that you have seen, why does it happen? What is the reason why governance is usually failing organizations instead of enabling innovation?
Yeah, that's another very good question. I would also want to answer correctly. So the core issue, governance gets designed backward. It's built as a permission gate. Prove it safe before you ship, instead of a feedback system that helps you learn faster. Here is what I see consistently: the mistakes. So the governance team write policies in a vacuum, and then they hand them to the builders as a checklist compliance. So engineers see it as a friction, not an insight. So they start hiding technical concerns instead of surfacing them. You lose the feedback loop exactly when you need it the most. What actually works, governance should be built into the decision-making process from day one, not bolted on after. That means a clear hierarchy. Who owns the AI decisions? Not the governance person, the business owner, right? So the stage rollout by design needs to be in place. So you have a shadow to canary, and canary to production, built into the architecture, not reviewed afterwards. The other point is a quarterly model benchmarking.
Okay.
You see every quarter, every few weeks, the model is keep on coming. Latest models are coming. You have to think about what are the reasonings, architecture, and everything. So no annual sign off. Keep everything aligned as the market moves. And honest escalation path. Like engineer trust that raising concern won't kill the project. It will redefine it. So when an engineer see the governance as a helping them ship safer, not slower, they lean in. That's when innovation and responsibility align instead of the conflict.
Okay, this makes sense. What about the time when you also wrote about this? You said that right now AI can confidently write like 80%, be independent but for 80%, but it still needs an engineer with an intuition, with the context to guide it, to help remove the obstacles, because AI can be very smart sometimes, and at the same time, it can be very stupid. So the person that is leading this AI is basically enabled by AI, but at the same time, AI is enabled by the person because it can navigate a lot of obstacles with the human. So when you're building an AI transformation project for any department in your company, you often see that there is an SOP, the way that people intend to do the process, And there is also hidden rules, unspoken knowledge, workarounds, things like that. So what did you learn about this 20% that lives in humans' heads? How do you approach this question? How do you try to translate this 20% to the AI to make a successful transformational project?
That's also well thought question. Let me answer this what I understood. So this makes sense about the time when I would say, the on capturing the hidden 20% is the main part. The
Mhm,
mistake most team makes it is asking people to document what they do. So they won't, not because they are hiding it, because, half of it's so automatic. They don't realize it's there. So here is what actually
mhm,
works. Process mining and not interviewing. So dig into the system logs, exception handlings, escalation patterns. When a support agent flags a ticket as, needs manual review, that's the date.
mhm,
When procurement rejects as a PO after approval, that's a rule nobody wrote down. The logs tell you where humans are overriding the standard path.
mhm,
Then I would see operator shadowing. Sit with someone for a full shift. Watch where they pause, where they call the colleagues, where they deviate from the SOPs. That
mhm,
friction is your signal. And I would see, I would say like a exception analysis. The edge case live in the 20%. They are the one that made the operator pick up the phone or escalates.
mhm,
Build your AI to recognize those patterns before it gets stuck. Then the lastly, I would say the feedback loops. In your
mhm.
staging phase, let the AI flags uncertainty early. I am 60% confident here. Should I escalate or guess? The operator teaches it over weeks, not in months. So
Yeah.
the transformation works when you automate the 80% and amplify the human judgment on the other 20%, not
Mhm.
replace it. That's where the real ROI lives.
100%. We like professional at X5. That's what I do. And I've seen so many different cases where you like everything that you said. It's like it's important that you do all of that together at the same time because it allows you to catch different parts of the context. Because sometimes you won't really see, like if you just observe the person, you won't get the full context of what they're doing. You need to cross-reference that. It makes sense, total sense. And at the same time, I've been reading that you wrote about a $3 million AI roadmap that you had to pause it for 6 weeks because your leadership didn't really understand what they were actually approving. So what did that time when you as a technical leader, what is this moment when you have to pause and you understand that your organization maybe is not really ready for this AI, or maybe you understand that the capabilities that AI is promising couldn't be used by your organization at the moment fully. So what did you learn about that moment when you had to pause? And what are you thinking about that pause right now?
Yeah, that's also a very interesting question. The pause came 3 weeks before the launch. I asked one
Hmm.
simple question in the room. What happened to our customer if the model confidence score drops below the threshold? So
Hmm.
after that, I have seen like, it's a complete silence. Not because anyone was unintelligent. These were very capable executives, but nobody
Hmm.
had mapped AI failure modes to an actual customer outcomes. That's when I realized and we had a capability without readiness.
Hmm.
Here is what that 6 weeks pause revealed. So the real gap was not a technical gap. We had a
Hmm.
solid model. The gap was organizational. Nobody in the accountability chain could articulate what the system does when it's uncertain. That's your readiness test. So what we built instead, a decision rights matrix. So
Hmm.
which has a high confidence, you can consider high confidence is equals to automate, and medium confidence is equals to human review within
Hmm.
4 hours. And low means immediate escalation.
Hmm.
That's the decision right metrics. Then an AI specific incident playbook is required because AI failures looks different. It's a gradual drift and silence hallucination sometimes,
Hmm.
and sometimes distribution shift. So you have to create a playbook for it. And then executive AI literacy is very, very important. Not how transformer work, but what decisions you are delegating And what happened when delegation fails? That's very important. I would see the executive of AI literacy should be the highest priority first. And a 3-week human in the loop period is very important before any automated action. So I think about it differently now. AI capability is a technology problem you can buy. AI readiness is an organizational problem. They move at a completely different speed, and most enterprises run them misaligned. That pause turned a potential liability into a permanent governance infrastructure. That's it.
Interesting. And on the topic of executive literacy, you mentioned that it's very easy to deliver a good demo. It's so much harder uh, to scale this into production because that's a whole job. It's a job. It's a different type of job. Often, when you're running a marathon, in the beginning, it's very fun, but then after the first 2% of the marathon, it starts being very, very boring. And you just have to run and then you finish. And then you have a big spike in the end once you're approaching the finish and you're finishing. I think in AI transformation projects, it's kind of the similar. And the demo is like this beginning when you do the demo and everybody's super excited, everybody's on the same team. But then sooner or later, the routine hits and it becomes boring and it's very hard to deliver the metrics. Often executives, they get overexcited in the first in the beginning, and then they completely neglect. They do not look at the right numbers because maybe they don't even know what kind of numbers they should look for in order to understand whether their AI initiative moving well or is it just a waste of time. So which is coming back to the question of literacy for executives. What would you recommend? What do you think is usually the most important metric or the metric that doesn't lie that your AI initiative is going well?
Yeah, I think that's another interesting question. You see, so I think you nailed the marathon analogy. The demo spike fades fast. That's exactly when the most executive check out, or worse, keep funding based on a wrong signal. So the metrics that doesn't lie is human override rate and how it changes over time. Here is why it cuts through the noise. I think that it's an honest answer. You can't game it. If your model outputs are being corrected 60% of the time in months, in month one, that's the real story. If it drops to 15% by month six, that's a genuine progress. It reveals organizational trust. When override rates plateau or tick back up, it signals drift and a distribution also shift. And that the model hit an edge case the team didn't anticipate. That's early warning, not a surprise at a board review. Also, it's tied to a business outcome. Lower overrides is less human labor, which means it's an actual savings. You can trace it directly to profit and loss. Beyond that, I would watch three more. One is, the reliability engineering SRE area, or it's the latency at 95th or 99th percentile, not average. Average lies under load. And we have to also think about the cost per inference trajectory, which are the unit economics for improving or improvement, I would say. And then the drift curves, how a model performance drifting as a production data over evolves. So the executives who win are the ones who shift from, is the demo impressive? Two, is the human still confident enough to let this run unattended? That question answers everything.
Okay. This was a very interesting conversation. And I think a good way to close it is going to be hearing one more piece of advice from you. So imagine that you have a leader in front of you, and this leader was green lighted. Their company gave them a mandate to run the first real AI deployment, not a pilot, not a proof of concept, nothing like that. They have to go and take the deployment into the scale. What would you recommend this person to do? Like one single piece of advice to make them successful. What would you say to that kind of leader?
Yeah. So I would, here's my answer. One thing, start with the shadow mode, not automation. So don't go live with autonomous decision on day one. Deploy your AI system to observe a real work for at least 2 to 4 weeks. Logging every prediction, every edge cases. Every time it would have made a wrong call without touching the actual process. Let the human make all the decisions while the AI runs silent beside them. Here is why this challenges everything. So you will catch distribution shift before it hits the production. So real data is messier than training set is. So shadow mode reveals it primarily. And you build an organizational trust when the teams see that AI's logic alongside their own decisions, they develop confidence instead of fear. And third, I would say you find the hidden process, the like those undocumented rules and exceptions your stakeholders forget to mention. Mode exposes them before they become a production incident.
Very
Deep
interesting.
or conversational. That's the area where you can find all the hidden processes. Lastly, I would say override rate becomes your baseline. So if the AI agrees with human 85% of the time in the shadow, that's your, North Star. You will want to improve it with the real data. And only then move to human in the loop with escalation, not full automation. That should be the approach. So the leader who ship lasting AIs are not the ones who go fastest. They are the ones who go thoughtfully enough that the organization trusts the system. Shadow mode is how you earn that trust.
I would sign under every word of what you just said, because that's the same thing that I see in my day to day. It's people just do not understand that if you go deep enough, as you say, in the shadow mode, how much money can be recovered just from observing the processes. Because in one scenario, you can understand the process better and you will just ship a way better AI deployment that's going to be trained on the SOP and on the unstandard rules that people are usually doing. As a second step, you can even observe the whole process and then understand which part of that is redundant. So then in your AI deployment, you don't have to copy the process the way that the humans were doing it. You can build a completely new, much leaner, much more efficient way of doing things. And that's where millions, tens of millions of dollars are coming from. And you haven't just by eliminating some parts of the processes, you already saved your company so much money that your AI implementation is going to be just a cherry on top.
Yeah, you have just articulated the entire leverage point here that most team misses. So shadow mode observation doesn't just validate the AI, it reveals process data that's been invisible to the leadership. You are logging every exception, every manual workaround, every step that exists because of a legacy system limitations nobody ever fixed. That's the gold mine. I'll give you a concrete example. When we built the procurement compliance system, shadow mode showed us that 23% of the purchase orders were being manually rerouted after the approval because the guided buying logic didn't match how regional teams actually operated. That was not a model problem. It was a process problem nobody had articulated. We eliminated those reroute steps entirely, redesigned the approval workflow, and recovered, 2.1 million in the first 6 months. The AI system itself, that drove another 7 and 8 million. But it was built on top of a fundamentally cleaner process. That's the difference between automation theater and the real transformation. You are not copying, the broken process into a code. You are using observation to expose what's actually the load bearing versus what's just accumulated craft. The executive who get this understand, like a shadow mode is a process audit tool first, and AI validator as a second.
Amen. This is great. I think you're gonna have a lot of questions from the audience to you. What's gonna be the best way for folks to reach to?
Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate this conversation. It's exactly the kind of practical ground level thinking that separates me. LinkedIn is probably the easiest. I'm pretty active there and respond to messages. You'll find me at linkedin.com/in/Debasish Tech. That's where most folks in the AI leadership space seems to hang out anyway. I do have my email address, which is my first name dot last name at automexcc.com. I do advisory work through expert networks like GLG Guidepoint and many others. So if someone's wrestling with a governance question or need help, thinking through a production deployment, I'm usually available for those conversations. And if people want to see what I'm building hands-on, the agentic AI tool and the automation work, so it's currently under stealth. I will be publishing soon. But
Okay.
honestly, the best way is probably just reach out directly. I'm pretty accessible.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for finding the time for the episode. Thank you for the insights. I really enjoyed the conversation and it has been amazing.
Thank you so much.